Hello everyone, and welcome to the Brain Tease. I'm your host Rachel, and let's talk brains. So I know I haven't posted in a while, but that's because I've been busy making content for this month. I am so excited. It is the month of May, which means it is Mental Health Awareness Month. For this month, I'm going to have a series of episodes that focus on mental health conditions, and in true Brain Tease fashion, I'll also sprinkle a little bit of what science tells us about what's going on in the brain for these mental health conditions. Today, we are going to discuss clinical depression, and we're going to discuss how antidepressants work and how depression might affect how the brain functions. Nowadays, it seems like depression is all over. Depression is an underlying theme of the drama The Sopranos, the adult cartoon BoJack Horseman, the teen drama 13 Reasons Why, and it's even the basis of a character on the sitcom Parks and Rec. Depression is everywhere in the media and is now taking over the internet in the form of depression memes. For those of you that don't know, memes are basically internet jokes. Fun fact, one recent study showed that viewing depression-related memes can help people with depression improve their mood. Now, on a more serious note, what is depression? Is it exactly like what we see on TV? Well, I feel like most of us have a general understanding that it is like sadness, but what makes depression different than everyday sadness? I think comedian Sarah Silverman has a beautiful description of what depression is like. In an interview, she said, "It feels like homesickness. It feels like you're terribly homesick, but you're home." I think this quote really captures how depression can make you feel out of sync with your own body and personality, how it can rob you of the joy and happiness you once felt, and it also shows the feeling of hopelessness that surrounds depression. Depression is a serious mental health condition. It includes symptoms that involve lack of interest or pleasure in activities, changes in sleep, changes in appetite, changes in movement, such as less physical activity or feeling more restless, loss of energy, fatigue, feelings of hopelessness, guilt and worthlessness, lack of concentration, difficulty making decisions, and lastly, suicidal thoughts or thoughts of self-harm. Depression is one of the most common mental health conditions, and about 17 million people in the United States, which is about 7% of the population, experience a depressive episode every year. A depressive episode is when someone has the symptoms that I just listed for at least 2 weeks. For now, we know that depression can be due to stressful life circumstances or traumatic events. Depression can also be genetic. One study showed that people are 3 times more likely to be at risk for depression if they have a parent, child, or sibling with depression. Now, this is a disclaimer. I cannot diagnose anybody with depression because I am not a licensed therapist. However, I have listed some resources in the description to help you with depression symptoms or to help you find a therapist in your area. So let's talk brains. Ultimately, the main takeaway I want to share with you today is that depression is not a choice. Depression is not a weakness. Research has shown differences in the brain between people who are depressed and people who are healthy. For the past 50 or 60 years, before brain imaging was even a thing, it's been hypothesized that people who have depression have low levels of serotonin in their brains. Serotonin is a feel-good chemical messenger produced in the brain. The way some antidepressants, such as Prozac, Zoloft, Celexa, and Paxil work, is that they basically allow more serotonin, that feel-good chemical, to be readily available in the brain. One cool recent finding shows that antidepressants like these can actually help with neuroplasticity, which is a process in the brain that can aid in brain growth and can protect the brain against damage. If you want to learn more about neuroplasticity, feel free to check out my exercise Gains vs. Brains episode. Anyway, though antidepressants can be super effective for some people, not everyone gets better with them. 50% of people with depression do not get better with currently available treatments. As you may know, if you or a loved one has experienced depression, treating depression can be a frustrating trial and error process. One antidepressant might not initially work, or one antidepressant that used to work may stop working effectively after some time. And this goes to show that there's much more to depression than just serotonin. So why do we want to study what depression looks like in the brain? Well, depression looks so different in different people, so there is no one-size-fits-all treatment for depression. Studying the brain can help us look for specific targets for new therapies and drugs. So far, research has shown that depression doesn't affect just one part of the brain, but rather a lot of different regions known as networks. So let me explain what networks are with my terrible football analogy. So the brain is made up of regions like the amygdala and hippocampus that you may have heard of. And these regions are like different football players on a team. And networks are brain regions that work together. So in this football analogy, a network would be the offense or the defense. So here are some important networks in the brain. First, we have the affective network. I call this the emotion network because it is involved in how we process emotion. Studies show that people with depression show more emotion processing region activation when looking at emotional, and especially negative emotional, images. In other words, this suggests that people with depression and their brains respond more to emotional things compared to healthy people. Next, we have the cognitive control network. I'll nickname this network the Get Stuff Done network. This network is involved when we do tasks and make decisions. And lastly, we have the default mode network. I'll call this the daydreaming and mind-wandering network. This network is activated when we think about ourselves, when we remember, and when we plan for the future. Some studies have shown that this network is more active in people with depression. And I think this finding makes sense because a depressed person might constantly think about their past regrets, so that's remembering the past, and they might have constant hopeless thoughts about their future, so that's thinking about the future. One study suggests that in depression, the networks of the brain are hot-wired, so the activity of one network can potentially override that of other networks. For example, when a person with depression focuses on a past regret, perhaps all of their networks would shift attention to thinking about a past regret. You can imagine this could be incredibly distracting if your Get Stuff Done network is focused on a past regret rather than, well, getting stuff done. Anyway, this hypothesis can explain a lot of symptoms in depression, including the decreased ability to focus on tasks and difficulty regulating emotions. I think that this finding shows the difficulty of depression because it shows how the brain can be wired differently in depression. All in all, studies have shown brain differences between people who are depressed and people who are healthy. The future of depression research is to generally learn more about how depression affects the brain so that we can better treat depression because, unfortunately, not everyone feels better with the current therapies that we have. It is especially important during this quarantine time to check in with yourself or a loved one. A recent University of Michigan survey showed that during this quarantine, 66% of people surveyed experienced sleep disturbances and hopeless thoughts consistent with depression. Everyone deserves to experience happiness, so if you think that you or a loved one may be experiencing depression, please utilize the resources that I listed in the description if necessary, and take care. That's all for today. I'll see you next time on The Brain Tease. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share. What have you always wondered about the brain? If you have an idea for an episode, feel free to message me at thebraintease.com or message me on Instagram at thebraintease.